One thing that people who are fans of history are always talking about is how important it is that we preserve our history and that we conserve the resources that teach us about our past. But we don't often think about just how that is done. Well, I've been hanging out with the people of the Indiana Historical Society here at the Indiana History Center, and they have a history lab here where they're combining science and history really to preserve some of the artifacts from the past. And I wanted to take one video just to show you what they do because it is so amazing, absolutely just blew my mind. Okay, so we're getting ready to dodge into the history lab here at the Indiana History Center. All right, so we are getting ready to go into the W. Brooks and Wanda Y. Fortune History Lab. And they're not just preserving history here, but they're also doing a lot to educate students and to educate the public, which I can definitely appreciate. So we're going to dodge in here, and before we go into the lab, take a look at just a little bit of what goes into history preservation. Our cultural heritage is our collective history. I couldn't agree more. So they have this thing here talking about 4 basic tenets of care for historical documents, and they are examining the objects, identifying the condition, treating the damage, and then storing them in a safe place. So there are probably a lot of us who have old photos or old documents in our house, and we would all do well to take efforts to preserve that history because you never know what benefit it could be in the future. Now, before we get into things, I really wanted to show this because it is just amazing. They had this old glass plate collection that came into their possession that had been in a fire. Now, take a look at this. This is some of the damage that was done to one of the glass plates. And through some preservation that I cannot even wrap my mind around, this is what they got out of it. So again, if you go over here, here was the damage to the glass plate. Here is the image that was pulled from it. So cool that they were able to save that. For those who are into the old Civil War tintypes, here's what a tintype looks like whenever it's all broken down into its individual pieces. So you have the brass preserver, cover glass, the brass mat, and then the case that it's in is called a union case. Very, very interesting. Now here's something that's kind of cool where they get, interactive with the public. This is an old damaged photo that the History Center came into possession of, and they have this touchscreen display that you can interact with and basically go in and if you want to see like what tide lines are. Well, if I can touch it properly, well then you can see what that looks like on a picture. If you want to see what fold lines are in a paper, they'll show you that. Foxing. Okay, so this is what happens whenever there's some kind of mold damage, and they show you what foxing looks like. Man, they have got everything here. Do you want to know why it's important not to touch historical items with your dirty hands? Well, this display shows you why. They have all of these different materials that they encourage you to touch, and as you can see, Well, like here's paper. It looks like this part has already been worn out, but you can touch this and you can see the damage that's done to the paper compared to how it originally looks. Here again, you can see with cotton and fabric the discoloration. Leather, you can see where this has all been roughed up here. Painted wood. Interesting. Huh. Oh, now this is just heartbreaking. This is a bundle of Civil War letters that was stored in a shoebox and kept in a crawl space beneath a house. And you can see there's been termite damage and moisture damage and just all kinds of terrible things. So this is why preservation and conservation is so important, because the history that was in these letters is gone forever. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the big things that they do here at the Historical Center is preserving historical documents. And really, where all of that work is done is right back here in the history lab. I always say that I'm looking for people who are smarter than me to teach me things, and I have a feeling that I'm definitely going to find it back here in this room. All right, so the room that I was just in was the history lab. I am now in the conservation lab, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of stuff that is just completely mind-boggling and unfamiliar to me, which is why I have Kathy with me. Kathy is the book conservator?
Yeah.
Okay, she is the book conservator here at the History Center. So she's going to kind of walk us through some of the things in this lab and talk about what history preservation looks like.
So I'm the book conservator here, and I'm primarily working with bound materials, books, scrapbooks, albums, things like that. And here's a piece that I'm just doing the condition report. I'm examining and documenting the condition of this item. It's going to need to be stabilized before it can be digitized and scanned in our preservation imaging department. So that's just what I'm working on here. A lot of the things we work on are getting used by patrons that could visit the library, or they're being scanned so they can be put up on our website and people can access them remotely. We get things that we work on as new acquisitions. If they come in and they need some sort of stabilization before they can be properly cataloged or stored, we get things that are damaged in the reading room, or if someone is using something and they notice that there's already damage, we'll work on things then, or like I said, for digitization purposes, or exhibits. We do a lot of work with exhibits as well. The lab is primarily a paper-based conservation lab, so we're working on anything that's a paper-based item, so books, albums, maps, photographs. We have a very large photograph collection. It's sort of organized in sections. So this section that we're in here is kind of the book section. So we have some presses, we have lying presses and all the equipment and materials you would need to work on books. And then over here, it's more of our flat paper area. So we're going to have very large tables where we can put larger items kind of spread out. Have our large light table over there. We have solvents, kind of a solvent working area here. And then over here we have like a wet working area. So this is where we would be washing paper and things like that if we needed to do that. And then we also have these blue fume extractors behind us. It's something we get asked a lot about. When people come through the history lab, they want to know what those blue tubes are. So they're just used when you are working with solvents at your bench and you need fume extraction. So.
Awesome. So can you talk about like washing paper? Because that was something that I found fascinating, because I didn't know you could wash paper.
Yeah. So sometimes we will need to wash paper, or I've washed entire books before. We don't wash everything, but sometimes you'll encounter an item that has a lot of staining, a lot of heavy discoloration, and washing it can pull all of those degradation particles and the discoloration out, and it can return some flexibility to the paper, and then you can also impart what we call a calcium reserve into the paper so that it lasts longer and is more like chemically stabilized over time. So we have these, I don't know, should I?
Sure, whatever you
pull
want.
them out? So we have these wash trays, and we'll fill them up with a little bit of water. And then we have these non-woven polyester supports that we place the item between, and then we place that in the bath. And then you just let that sit for a while, and then you'll end up seeing the bath water kind of change into this almost like iced tea color, depending how much gunk is in the paper. And then we'll just swap out those baths for multiple baths until the water is clear. And then when the water's clear, we know that the paper is clean. And we'll take it out, and we can either air dry it on a drying rack. This is like a little drying rack back here. Or we can dry it between blotters underneath the weight so that it dries flat.
Interesting. Yeah. Who would have ever thought that you could wash paper? Interesting. I know that a lot of people in their homes have old pictures and old documents and things like that from their family. Well, I had an uncle who was in World War II in the Navy, was on the USS Mulaney, and he had this unit photo that was taken and mailed back to his wife in this tube. And it has been in here since probably 1944 and has been removed, a few times just for people to look at. So anyway, I'm going to give this to Kathy, and she's going to talk about like what she would be looking for and maybe how people could, preserve these items in their own home.
So consultations is something that we do offer here at the Indiana Historical Society, and you can go to our website. We have a conservation page, and there's more information on there if you want to schedule a consultation with us. When looking at an item like this, the first thing you want to do is you want to look to see, is there any sort of damage, and you can see, like if you look closely, there's some tearing inside here. So
Okay.
I know that I'm going to
Yeah.
have to be very careful when I'm removing this paper so that I don't tear it anymore. And if you're ever unsure about it, just try to contact a professional or conservator, and it'd be better to take something like that to them than try to attempt it yourself if you're concerned that you're going to damage it. So the next thing I want to try to look for with rolled items is how flexible is this paper? If, as I'm touching it, does it feel like it's going to unroll safely, or does it feel like it's going to fall up, like break and split in my hands? So this feels pretty good. It feels pretty flexible, so I'm confident I can unroll this without using humidity. So I'm going to add some weight on here as kind of like a third hand. And I can slowly and gently unroll it. So yeah, you can see this piece of paper here is torn completely down the middle.
Okay.
Over here. Well, not completely, almost completely. This tear goes about here.
Okay.
So this is pretty fragile. I'm just going to let it roll back up. But if you wanted to look at it more closely, you could put some more weight on this side to examine it better. But in order to flatten this entirely, it would need to be humidified and flattened, and that's something you should have a conservator do for you.
Now, is there any way to fix those tears, or I'm guessing that Scotch tape is not the answer?
Yeah, no, please don't put tape on your items. We mend things with wheat starch paste, and in the history lab, we were pre-COVID having facilitated lessons on how to mend paper with wheat starch paste. It wasn't the exact paste that we use, but we do sell kits here at the history lab that with instructions on how to prepare the paste and use it. So basically you would mend it with on the back with wheat starch paste and a long fiber paper that is thinner than the material so that it doesn't damage the material or cause break in the material.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are ways. But
Gotcha.
again, if you took it to a conservator, that's something that they could do as well, because you would want to test it and make sure that it can withstand being mended with something that's wet, because we have multiple ways of mending things, so there'd be some testing that would be involved first.
Okay.
So next I'm going to look in here, and I can see there's a photograph in here, and I'm just looking to see, are there cracks, tears in the photograph. There's a few surface cracks, but not bad. So I'll do the same thing. Actually, I'll put a pair of gloves on since this is a photograph. So a lot of times we just have clean, washed hands when we're working with paper materials, because the photograph, like especially if it's brittle paper, the gloves can catch and cause more damage. But when we're working with photographs, we will wear gloves. So I can already feel this is very tightly rolled. And again, I'm not trying to force it. I'm kind of trying to feel like how much can I unroll this without humidity. I don't think I'm going to be able to unroll this very much, frankly. It's pretty springy.
Okay.
I can unroll the outer part because it's not as tight of a roll, but the further I go, kind of the more resistance I'm getting. So I really don't want to push it too much. I don't want to cause any other damage. As you can see here, that there are some cracks in the emulsion layer. And I'm not, because I can't safely unroll it the rest of the way, I don't know what other kind of damage there is, or I don't want to risk causing more damage.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
This definitely, you would want to consult a conservator and have them humidify and flatten this for you, because there's a lot of little cracks kind of throughout. So.
Okay.
Yep. But the image is nice. You
Yeah.
can see part of the date over here. 1944.
Yeah. Yeah, he was in the Battle of Iwo Jima and Battle of Okinawa.
He's over on the other.
Of course,
far
on the side that we can't unroll
he's
it.
over on the other corner.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. So here's an example of some of the work that they've done here in the conservation lab. You can see right here where somebody had decided to do their own conservation work and tape this document up. Well, they were able to remove that, and this is what it looked like afterwards. Absolutely incredible.
So if we were to humidify this here, we would put it in this chamber, which is actually a suction table that's useful for pulling stains out of paper, but it kind of doubles as a humidity chamber. So we would close this, and then we would have an ultrasonic humidifier that we would attach here. We get a tube, and it would fill up with humidity, and it would cause the paper in the photograph emulsion layer to just sort of relax over time, and then we can let it sit in there and relax, and then once it's kind of flattened itself, we can dry it between blotters and boards, or some other material that we feel is appropriate after unrolling it and kind of getting a better look at it. So
Now, for something like this, how long do you think it would take to relax out?
it depends. Sometimes you don't. That's a conservator's favorite answer. It depends, because you don't really know until you kind of start working with it.
Okay.
This could end up being very responsive, and it might unroll in a matter of minutes, or it could take quite a bit of time. It might have to be in there for, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour even. It depends. Or
Really?
you might have to have multiple passes.
Okay.
So whenever we're humidifying something, we're not just turning it on and like walking away. We're keeping an eye on it. We have a humidity gauge that we can keep an eye on, so that we have the chamber, the specific humidity for that piece. So yeah, we might also do one pass, dry it, and then it might still be wanting to roll, so you might have to do multiple treatment steps. It really depends. Until you get into it, you really can't predict how long it's going to take.
Man, that is fascinating. All right, well, that was the conservation lab right here at the Indiana History Center. I know in education we kind of tend to group things and silo the different subject matters. So you have like science and history and English. Well, this is a place where all three of those are coming together. Very, very fascinating process. And they also have a link on their website where you can search out conservators in your region. So I'll put a link to that in the description. But yeah, very fascinating place. Glad we spent some time here today. I know that a lot of people have old photographs and old documents and things like that in their home, me included. This, look at me, I'm about ready to drop stuff.